Hello, everyone. My name is Ariella Wagner. I'm the founder of SunRay Construction Solutions, a national construction document service. We secure over $10 billion annually for general contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers. Today, we have another extraordinary and incredibly important webinar on don't sign a release unless it says this one thing. Seriously, don't do it. And today's incredible attorney, Alex Barthet, is going to, of course, conduct our webinar. So without further ado, I'll introduce Alex Barthet.
Thank you, Ariella. Again, my name is Alex Barthet. I am a board certified construction attorney in Florida. And today we're going to talk about releases. And we're going to talk about the one thing that you absolutely need to make sure you check for in the next release that you sign, which may even happen today. I'll also give you some bonus tips on some other things to keep in mind. So with that, let's get started. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about releases and their various forms. I'm going to show you what they look like and how they work. I'm going to talk about the one thing you need to make sure that is in every one of the releases that you sign, so that you make sure you protect yourself as best as possible. We're going to talk about conditional releases also, because that's obviously a very important component of exchanging releases. And of course, we will answer any of the questions you have at the end. With respect to those questions, go ahead and submit your questions in the GoToWebinar chat box, which should be on your screen. We'll answer all the questions at the end. Do me a favor, please make sure not to include the names of any people or companies in your questions. So let's take a look at releases and what they look like and the various forms that they may come in. So the first thing that matters is, are you a GC? Are you a sub? Are you a supplier? That's going to dictate what the form of release should be. The general rule is that you want to give a narrow release when you get a check, and you want to get a broad release when you give a check. So for example, if you're a subcontractor and you're going to pick up a check, you would like to give a narrow release, meaning you want to give up the fewest rights as possible in order to get that check. The converse is also true. If I am a general contractor and I am giving a check to my subcontractor, I want them to give up all of the rights that they could possibly have in order to get that check, so that I don't have to worry about other claims arising in the future. We're going to look at what those releases look like, so you have a better sense of it. But let's start with the basic releases. And those releases are the releases found in Chapter 713, the lien statute. So here is the basic release upon progress payment. It's a very, very simple release. It has a few spots that you need to fill in information. So one of them is the amount of money that you're getting, and the through date. We're going to come back to this through date in a bit, because it's very, very critical. It only gives up lien rights. It doesn't give up any other rights, meaning you have lots of rights. You have rights for change orders, extras, delays, personal injuries, property damage, and lien rights. A lien release tailored consistent with the statute, the lien statute, only gives up lien rights. So you would still retain all of those other rights. Let's take a look at the release upon final payment. You'll notice it has a spot for the amount of money you're getting, but what's interesting is it has no through date. And the reason that's important is that it's effective as of the day you sign it. Meaning, if I pick up a check today, and I sign a lien release today that has no through date, I am giving up all of my lien rights through and including today. So if I were to pick up a check through the end of May, and I signed a lien release that had no through date, and I signed it today, the effective date of that release is today, meaning I just gave up all of my rights after May, so June and July. So you have to be very careful. And again, we're going to talk about the through date in a minute. So we looked at the two statutory lien releases. Let's take a look at this one. Now, the first thing you can see about this release is that it has a lot more words. And as a general rule, the more words that the lien release has, the more likely it is that you are releasing lots more rights than just lien rights. So let's take a look at this one. This one has a release for $10. We'll talk about that in a minute. But look at all of the things that you're releasing with this lien release. Not only are you releasing lien rights and rights to claim a lien, but you're also releasing any and all claims, change orders, works, materials, delays, fees, costs, losses, expenses, damages. It's a whole litany of things that you're giving up. This is what lawyers would call a general release. You're giving up pretty much all of your rights through this through date. So this form of release is a partial release because it has a through date. So if I put May 30th as the through date, what I am doing in this release is I am giving up all of my rights that I could possibly have through that through date. So you have to be very careful. Now, this release, if you notice, the last two sentences also include additional statements. So not only are you giving up certain rights, but these last two sentences make affirmative representations about certain things. So it says the undersigned further warrants that all work and materials supplied by, through, or under it fully comply with the applicable contract documents. So not only are you giving up your rights, but you're going to verify every month that those that your work complies with all of the contract documents. It goes on. This release does not release, I'm sorry, it's the sentence above. The undersigned warrants and represents that it has paid all bills and sums due to any and all suppliers, persons, employees, agents, and contractors working under or through the undersigned, through and including the date listed above. So not only are you saying that your work complies with the contract, but it says that you have paid everybody. So be careful when you sign releases, because not only are they may be giving up rights, you may be giving up your rights in exchange for that payment, but you may be making affirmative statements. What we find is that when contractors are in a hurry to exchange money for a release, they believe that the release is just this ministerial act. I sign these papers, I get my check, I don't have to think about it again. We have won many cases because people have signed releases that they probably shouldn't have. We currently have a case going on right now where we represent a developer, and the contractor signed a lien release that gave up their rights to over $1 million worth of their claim. And that issue is being heavily litigated now because they claim that that release should have never been executed, even though it was executed by their president. I think it's going to be a tough road for them to hoe to support that. But that gives you an example of how important these release documents are. You should not just take them for granted. You should read them, and you need to understand them before you execute them. So let's revisit the general rules of the game here, best practices. How do you deal with these releases? If you agree to a form of release that is in your contract, or your contract says something like you agree to sign a form of release that's acceptable to the general contractor or to the owner or to the subcontractor, you may be bound to use that form. So what do you need to do? When you negotiate the contract that you're about to sign and you look at the scope of work and the price and the schedule, you also need to look at the legal terms that are in the agreement. And you need to make sure that if there are release forms that are an exhibit to the contract, that you include any changes to those release forms so that you have the right to be able to use a different form if that's what you want. So let's talk about the one thing that you absolutely need to do and check every time you sign a release. And that is you need to match the through date with the dollars that you're getting. This sounds incredibly simple. We see clients make this mistake routinely. The through date is the effective date of your release. So remember, if your release has a through date, you're also going to have a date that you sign it. If it has no through date, then the day you sign it is the date that it is effective, and that becomes the through date. The through date will always control over the payment amount. Let me explain what this means, and this is where most of our clients that come to us with an error realize that they made the mistake. The through date is the date in the release that I showed you. If you are expecting a $50,000 check that gets you paid for the month of May, and when you show up to pick up the check, or they send you a copy of the check, and they're only going to pay you $30,000, you have a problem. You know that you did $50,000 worth of work in the month of May. If they want to release through the end of May, and they're only going to give you $30,000, you need to either change the amount of money that you're getting, tell them I can't accept $30,000 because I did $50,000 worth of work in May, or you need to change the through date. So maybe $30,000 gets you through the 14th of the month, or the 4th of the month, or the 26th of the month of May. Whatever that through date is, that's the through date that needs to be in the release if you're only getting, in my example, the $30,000. Here's where the problem occurs. You've done $50,000 worth of work. You're only going to get $30,000 as a check, and you sign a release that is through the end of the month of May. A dispute occurs in the future over the accounting, and you say, well, I only got $30,000, so clearly that other $20,000 must be coming later. The problem is that the through date will control over the payment amount, such that if you gave up all of your rights for $30,000 through the end of May, a court will uphold that as the effective date of the release, meaning you made the business decision to take $30,000 instead of $50,000 to release your rights through the end of May. A judge after the fact is not likely going to change that fact for you. So you have to be very careful about that. And as I said, if they don't match, you need to change one or the other or both so that they do match. So what about conditional releases? A conditional release is a release that is expressly conditioned upon payment. So here's a sample conditional release sentence you can write into your releases. You can handwrite it, you can get a stamp made for it, whatever you'd like to do, but you need to add conditional language to your release if you are giving someone a release and you're not getting money at the moment. So the sentence is, notwithstanding anything to the contrary, this waiver and release is conditioned upon and not effective until the undersigned receives paid funds of blank. So if you're expecting a $50,000 check in the month of May and they want your release now in order to fund your May payment, then you need to make sure that that release is conditional on you actually receiving the money. Because if you give someone a release and they pass that release on to the owner, for example, and you never get your money, you will, and I know this is hard for a lot of people to imagine, you will lose your lien rights. There are a few cases in the state of Florida in which a court has held that when an innocent owner or contractor, having no reason to know that you didn't get your money, receives an unconditional release, and it funds against that unconditional release, then you will no longer have lien rights on that amount of money. So you need to be very careful that if you are giving someone a release that and you are not immediately receiving a check in exchange, that release be conditional. And again, you can make it conditional by adding this language. Be careful. Sometimes we see releases that are titled conditional release of lien, and when you look at the document, it has no conditional language, that will not be a conditional release. So the fact that it's titled conditional but doesn't have conditional language does not make it a conditional release. And you have to be very careful that the amount of money that you're putting in the release is not $10. So if you're expecting a $30,000 check, the conditional release needs to be in the amount of the check you're actually receiving. So it has to be a $30,000 release, not a $10 release. Now, the SunRay release system includes all of these forms of releases. Ariel, are you there? You want to talk to us about the
Absolutely.
SunRay release system?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, as Alex went over, these are statutory forms. These are forms that have been created by the legislation, and basically there are certain requirements that need to be filled in. And our application will help you. If you do your notices to owners through our system, we find who the owner is, we provide the legal description. So these are all statutory forms, but again, it's imperative that you provide the correct information. So the other parts of the application, your waivers are all saved. So you could be working on a project for over a year, and all of your waivers, your partial waivers, your conditional, the conditional language, by the way, that Alex spoke of, we have that on all of our waivers. So it's conditioned upon payment, which is a huge part of your waivers process. The other project, pardon me, the I think I got it all out, folks. All right, so let's try that again. So one of the other wonderful features is that you can upload all of your notarized documents inside of the system as well. So the system allows you to track whatever someone else did, and if someone's on vacation, you can have it right then and there. One of the points that I think is extremely important that Alex was expressing, and we see it all the time, the $10 amount. I don't know where that originated from. Maybe Alex can shed some light on that. But it is essential to provide the correct dollar amount and the correct through date. Now, SunRay's application will put everything else in there for you. Who needs to notarize it? It will save that for you, but the correct amount, whether or not you can put conditional language, you have the option in the SunRay application to do that as well, and of course the through date. So those are really important things to take away as key takeaways from not only the webinar, but also what the SunRay application can help each and every one of our users with. Other than that, Alex, are there any other points that you think we need to touch upon?
No. Do we have any questions, Ariella?
So far we don't have any questions. I know that a question that comes up all the time while people are maybe thinking of questions or they have a particular situation. One question that comes up all the time is, my general contractor gave me this release and will not allow me to, or will not let me, if I don't sign it, then I don't get a check. So I know that that's a question that comes up all the time. So what do you have to say about a question like that?
Sure. We hear that from clients all the time. So preparation is the best thing to do because we know this is going to happen. So as I mentioned, you want to make sure that you review your contracts and ensure that you have some control over the form of release that you are going to have to sign. So before you execute the contract, look to see if the contract requires a certain form of release. If it does, then you need to know that that's what the contractor or owner are going to require of you. So it becomes very hard to complain after the fact if you signed a contract that said that's the form of release we're going to use. The other situation is, okay, you have now decided, you've signed this contract and now you need to make this decision where the owner or the contractor says, if you don't sign my release, I'm not paying you. You need to make a business decision, unfortunately, what you're going to do. I was on the phone yesterday with a client who's expecting a $1.9 million monthly draw, and they want to add exclusions to their release, and the contractor won't let them. So we talked through some of the issues and risks and benefits of taking certain actions, and I helped them make a business decision on what to do and how we're going to handle it moving forward. So it's not easy. There's not one cookie cutter, one size fits all approach in that situation. The best advice I can give you is know that it will occur later and modify your contract now to try to minimize those problems occurring in the future.
That's great, Alex. Yeah. And
Let me
so far, yeah, we don't have any questions.
let me talk about our next webinars. We do these every month. They're free. They last about 20 minutes once a month. The next one we have is in August, on August 25th, and it's what happens after I send my bond claim? How do I get paid? We'll talk about the bond claim process and what are the things that you need to do once you submit everything. How do you actually turn that into a check? And then on September 22nd, we'll go through a subcontractor's step-by-step guide to getting paid. I'll go over the most important things we see our most successful clients do in order to get paid. You can sign up for these and the rest of the webinars and seminars that we have for the rest of the year if you go to sunraynotice.com/webinars. And if anyone has any other questions that you think of later, here's Ariella and my contact information. Give us a call, send us an email. We'll be happy to answer the questions you have, even if you think of them later. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Alex. Wishing everyone a sunny day.